Pastor Will here for April 11th, 2021, part 13 of our 169 series, Better Know a Miracle. I encourage you to remember in prayer. There's been a lot of bad weather in our nation and all around the world. Let's remember people who are suffering due to that bad weather. And if it's near you, think about how you can reach out and help people recover. And let's continue to remember the pandemic, the medical field who continues to work with this and try to help people, and the scientists who do the same. And let's be courageous and faithful enough ourselves that we don't slip into the idea that it's over and we can just go on living however we want without any regard for the needs of other people. Let's remember and be gracious during these times. Okay, so far we've discussed 33 miracles to date, and there are 169 miracles right now. We started out with fewer than that, but we've added some. And I just want to let you know, in fact, we won't cover all 169 miracles. Some of them are so-called miracles, and I say so-called because there's a big block of these so-called miracles that blame God for a lot of nefarious acts. And my hermeneutic won't allow me to blame God for that and bring God into that. But I will discuss those and point them out and tell you my reasoning on them. But we're probably are looking at about 95 to 120 miracles, and we'll cover them. We're getting ready to wipe out a big giant block today. In fact, today I've got 3 miracles lined up, but in fact, it could be about 12 miracles, and I might knock them out anyway. But today we're looking for sure at 3 miracles. It's John 20, 19 through 33, or actually the whole chapter of John. This is where Jesus was crucified and resurrected, and then Mary and some of the disciples run to the tomb, and they discover that it's empty. And that, Jesus is resurrected. We discussed that last week. And then Jesus calls Mary by name, and Jesus appears to Mary, and she's like excited and like, wow, it really is you. You're really alive. And she runs to tell the rest of the disciples what she's seen. And that's a miracle because that's one of the miracles that's called one of the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus to Mary. And then the second one is the post-resurrection appearance of Jesus to the disciples who are hiding in a locked room. And the third is the post-resurrection appearance of Jesus to Thomas in that same room a week later. Why are these miracles? Well, they're miracles. Look, why does Jesus do this? Why does he appear to these people? He appears to them to reassure them that he is still with them, therefore God is still with them. He appears to them to reassure them that nothing is impossible with God. He appears to them to reassure them so that they can fulfill their mission of living their lives like Jesus, so the world knows that God is present with the world and loves the world. So Jesus appears to them to reassure them that God is still there, but also to empower them to fulfill their mission to take up the cross and follow Jesus along the same path so the world knows the love of God. Okay, so we got that out of the way. So let's go on and look at the text out of John 20 in more detail. John 20, starting in verse 19. The other lectionary texts for today are Psalm 133 and Acts 4, 32 through 35. The Psalm and the Acts texts are about what it means to live in unity. The sermon would be too long if I include all these texts today, so I plan to talk about the Acts and Psalm text next week, and this week just cover the John 20 text. So it's the evening of Easter, and the disciples have gathered in a room where they're hiding in fear. We don't know how many disciples. If you want to say there were only 12 disciples originally, we know that Thomas and Judas aren't there, so there would be 10 in the room. But we know from John's gospel that he doesn't have 12 disciples. He has lots and lots of disciples. In fact, Jesus sends out 70 disciples. So if there's only 70 disciples and Judas and Thomas aren't there, there's 68 disciples in the room. Who knows? There are a lot of people in the room and they're terrified and they've locked the doors. And John points out the doors are locked. Some years ago, a friend of mine by the name of Candy Sauer, she did a presentation for a group of churches in which she had gone around in that town, in that neighborhood or whatever, that community, and she had taken pictures of different doors of various buildings, church doors, police station doors, grocery doors, homes, all these different doors. And she showed the different doors to us on a video and then invited us to think about how we felt when we saw these doors. Some of the doors were invited you to come on in. Some were threatening, stay away, don't come here. Some were comforting and some were frightening. It was really a very creative, fun presentation. I really enjoyed it. If she had shown a picture of the disciples' doors where they were today, it would have been, a door that was barricaded against the world. The disciples had barricaded themselves into this room because they were terrified that they would be associated with Jesus, who the authorities had put to death, and they might be next. Surely they will be next because they associated with this Jesus. Someone may recognize them, and so they better hide. Sounds like a pretty good idea. They're terrified. No one is to come in. So, despite all that Jesus had told them that would happen, that he must die and that he would come back in 3 days, they still didn't get it. They didn't believe it. They didn't yet believe in the power of God, which is free, and instead have settled for the power of the world, which is frightening. It leads to fear and paralysis. So they're letting their fears determine their actions instead of being empowered by God. Compare their lack of belief and the subsequent fear with Jesus' presence of belief in God and courage to continue on the path to the cross despite his fear. That's what discipleship brings. That's what a proper relationship with God brings. It means a life not lived in fear, but in joy, despite all the obstacles around us. So what guides you in your life? Is it fear or is it faith? If we were in the disciples' shoes, would we have any reason today, would we have any reason to be afraid of the authorities due to our association with Jesus? I know that maybe you've noticed, maybe you haven't. But some years ago, I was writing a book on homelessness, and I wrote a bunch of municipalities to ask them about their laws on homelessness, and I did a lot of research, and it's really appalling how many municipalities and even our nation have passed laws making it illegal to help people. It's not only illegal to panhandle in a lot of places. Florida and North Carolina are two of the worst states for this. Horrible. It's illegal to give to panhandlers. It's illegal to give away food to people. You can't give food to people. You can't go into a park and give food. You can't walk around and give food. It's illegal. People are arrested for it. You can't leave water in the desert for people who are crossing the desert from South America trying to get to a better life. That's against the law according to our nation. And last year, as you may recall, a young doctor was prosecuted for that, for leaving water in the desert for people who are thirsty. And of course, our favorite, and don't worry, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you can't help an enemy of the nation. So, are we good, loyal citizens of our communities, or are we good, loyal citizens of the kingdom of God? Because Jesus' message is in direct opposition to those kind of rules. Jesus says, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was an enemy and you loved me. Who do you serve? What testimony does your life give to the world? Do we barricade ourselves into our own little worlds, our own little rooms, perhaps our church buildings, our homes, whatever, our family? Do we barricade ourselves into a point that Jesus cannot get in? And if Jesus does somehow manage to wriggle in, do we recognize him when he's in our midst. The disciples didn't recognize him. Only when he showed them their wounds did they recognize him. But they didn't recognize him at first. I think of all the wounded people who have come to churches where I've served as a pastor over the years, and they didn't reveal their wounds and how the church treated them. I think of the young man who had just found out his father had died, and he wanted to get back to his family in Alabama. I was in Atlanta then. And the church just flat turned him down. No, we're not going to help you. I think of that young man a lot. That was 31 years ago. And I'm still ashamed. I think of the painter, the house painter who needed money. He needed help. And so he said he would paint the 3-story wing of the church building if they would just pay him something fair. And they paid him $25 and they laughed about it because they got such a good deal. I think of that wounded man a lot. I think of the transsexual who came to church seeking the compassion of God. He came with hope that God would accept him and love him. And I think of the people there ridiculing him and cursing him and calling him names and pushing him down in the churchyard where he sat and cried. What a wounded man. I think of the scores of people who show up hoping for something to eat, for a measure of compassion, for someone who will see them as human, who will see them as a child of God, worthy of just a measure of love. And I think of churches who respond, well, we give either they respond with no, oh no, go on, move on down, we're going to call the police. Or you can go down to the police station, maybe they'll help you. That's another slamming of the door. Or the ones who say, well, we give to a community pot, and that way the resources can be used better. So if you need help, don't come to us who represent Christ. Go to a civil government and and fill out some paperwork and some forms, and if you qualify, they will help you. Which is basically a dead end and a weaselly way and a cowardly way for a church to abandon its calling and responsibility. In effect, when a church does that, it shuts its doors against the world. Just like the disciples, when we act that way and lock ourselves away to protect ourselves, it indicates that we haven't yet decided who we're going to serve. The disciples weren't yet sure what message they would share with the world. Would it be the same old, the status quo? Or would it be the word of Christ, which is empowering? They were still living in unbelief and in fear. And in the midst of their fear, Jesus appears with the same message he's always had from his birth through his life. Peace be with you, he says. And they're screaming in terror, how did you get in here? What are you? Who are you? And he repeats it again. Peace be with you guys, it's me. I told you I'd be back. The same message of his birth, peace on earth. To be in the presence of Jesus is to be in the presence of peace. And to be a disciple of Jesus is to be about the business or the mission of peace, like Jesus promoted peace. Through grace, through love, through forgiveness. So he greets them, peace on earth, and after he said this, he showed them his hands and his side, and the disciples realized it really is him, and they rejoice. And they're assured and reassured. Wow, what he told us is true. What he told us about God is true. Wow, I can't believe it, but here he is. Thomas is going to be really upset he missed this. And then he goes on to say, as the Father has sent me, so I send you. It's the same message Jesus gave over and over and over again. Jesus said, I am here to glorify God, and my disciples are to do the same. I will glorify God by going to the cross. My disciples will do the same by taking up their cross and following me there. And we will show the world what it means to love. Same message. Jesus didn't stop his message. Jesus didn't say, that was quite the ordeal, and I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. So just forget it. I did it, so just forget it. No, he says, you know what? I did it, and I expect you to do the same thing. If you believe in me, you will. It was upon seeing the wounds of Jesus that the disciples are reassured that it was really Jesus and that God was in fact still with them. But they didn't really believe yet. How do we know this? Because the text tells us that a week later, they were in the same house again with the door shut. And Jesus appears again. And this time he shows himself to Thomas and says, "Hey, Thomas, I missed you last time. I thought I'd come by and say hey. It's good to see you." And Thomas is like, "I'm not so sure." And he says, "I heard that you didn't really believe it was me before because you hadn't seen my wounds. I tell you what, why don't you come up here and put your hands here where I was stabbed and where these big giant spikes went into me. Put your fingers, just put it right all the way through. It's all right." Thomas goes, "My God, it really is you. I can't believe it." Thomas, just like his fellow disciples, Thomas needs to see to believe in the presence of God. And when he sees, he believes, and he's empowered to live his life for God. That's what he does thereafter. People need to see to believe in the presence of God. They need to see God present with them to believe in it. And when we see, we believe, and we're empowered to give our lives to God. I know that I'm often empowered by what I see. I often believe when I see the testimony of the lives of other people who show me Christ in their love. I'm thinking right now of you, Kay, of you and Wade taking in those little girls and giving them a chance at life. And I know that you're sacrificing a lot. And I know that you're also blessed in your sacrifice and in your love. But I want to say to you, well done, good and faithful servants. And I want to thank you for being an inspiration to others and to me, so that I can see that God is still here, even in all this chaos. God is still here. God is still working miracles. The world needs to see to believe in the presence of God. What is the church showing the world? How is the church showing God to the world? So I've shared with you a friend of mine I had years and years ago who had nothing and had no power, no electricity, if you will, no plumbing, none of the things we take for granted. Nothing, had nothing. No bathroom inside or anything. No toilet paper. He would find rags on the road and wash them in the river and clean them and then use them for toilet paper. He had nothing, so I shared what I could with him. I shared I had more resources than him. And so the way of God is those who have more share with those who have less. So there's no need or no needy among us. That's the economy of God. So I shared with him and I provided some things for him. And one of the things that he was overjoyed with was a solar powered radio with a crank on it. You could crank it and he never had to worry about batteries. And he told me he would sit at night and he would sit in his bed and he would listen to the music. And when he listened to the music, he realized that in that music and in the gift of his ability to listen to that music, he realized God had not forgotten him and that God was with him. It takes grace. It takes grace to share God with other people. It takes giving of ourselves to share that God is with you. How does the world come to know God is here? Well, the world will only know that God is present through the lives of the people who say they follow God and they follow Christ. We're going to look into that more next week. We'll look at the Psalm 133 and the Acts 4 text and see what it means for the church or the disciples of Christ to properly proclaim the presence of God in the world. And I encourage you to look at those texts. And I'm going to give you a hint. It calls for unity and it calls for the economy of God. The economy of God is not based on greed, but on grace. So that will be next week. I hope the best for you this coming week. And peace be with you. Peace be with you. May you enjoy the blessings and the love of God and share that love with others. Amen.